What if the next great chapter of the Catholic Church didn't begin in the splendor of Rome, but in the modest neighborhoods of Chicago? Not in the echo of ancient Latin hymns, but in the quiet footsteps of a missionary walking alone beneath the scorching sun of a Peruvian village, in a world divided by wealth and war, where even faith feels uncertain. The Church has chosen a man unlike any pope before him. He's not a prince of power. He's not a scholar of showmanship. He is Robert Francis Prevost, a quiet priest who never sought the spotlight, and yet now wears the ring of the fisherman. They call him Pope Leo XIV. But to those who know his story, he is simply the servant who kept saying yes. Yes to the poor. Yes to the forgotten. Yes to the hard roads that most would never walk. This is not the story of a man who climbed the church. It's the story of a man who knelt beside it, and in doing so, was quietly lifted by something greater than ambition faith. So stay with us, because what you're about to discover isn't just the story of the first American Pope. It's the story of how humility became history. May 8th, 2025. The air in Vatican City was unusually still. The world watched, breath held, as eyes turned to the tiny chimney above the Sistine Chapel. Then it came white smoke. 1,000 years of tradition condensed into a silent cloud, rising toward the sky, a signal that history had been made once again. Just hours later, the announcement echoed across St. Peter's Square, bouncing off marble pillars and into hearts around the world. Habemus Papiam, we have a pope. But what followed next left many stunned. Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, born in the United States, was chosen by the College of Cardinals to lead the Roman Catholic Church. He took the name Leo XIV, a choice that carried deep symbolism and respect for his papal predecessors, especially Pope Leo XIII, known for his emphasis on human dignity, social justice, and care for the working class. Journalists scrambled to write the headlines: First American Pope in History. From Chicago to the chair of Peter Leo XIII, the missionary pope. In less than 24 hours, the name Robert Prevost had become known, not just among the faithful, but to politicians, humanitarians, and everyday people in every corner of the globe. He was called a servant pope, a quiet reformer, and a man deeply shaped by the poor. But behind the camera, flashes behind the sudden fame, there was no drama, no political maneuvering, no firebrand speeches. Just a calm man standing on the loggia of St. Peter's Basilica, dressed in white, head bowed in silence. His first words as Pope were not to boast, but to ask, "Pray for me." In that moment, millions watching, whether Catholic or not, felt something shift. This was not just another papal election. This was the beginning of something quieter, perhaps gentler, but no less powerful. A new page had been turned, and the man holding the pen was once just Father Bob to the people of Peru. But who is Pope Leo XIV? How did a boy from Chicago, a missionary in South America, rise to lead the most ancient and widespread institution on earth? To answer that, we must go back, way back, to where it all began, with a simple family, a simple faith, and a boy who believed that to lead is first to serve. From Chicago to Chiclayo, a life of purpose. Long before the white smoke, before the Vatican, the crowds, and the cameras. There was just a boy named Robert. Robert Francis Prevost was born on September 14, 1955, in Chicago, Illinois, to a working-class Catholic family. His roots were woven from multiple cultures: French, Spanish, Italian, and like many immigrant families in America, they carried their faith like a lantern, lighting the way through hardship. Robert grew up in a modest neighborhood where church wasn't just for Sundays, it was the heart of daily life. His earliest memories weren't of ambition or success, but of sacred hymns echoing through a small parish, of lighting candles for the sick, and of watching the quiet strength of priests who served without ever needing applause. He was a thoughtful child, often quiet, drawn not to noise, but to meaning. While other kids chased after popularity, Robert chased after purpose. By his early 20s, it was clear he wasn't going to be an engineer, a businessman, or a lawyer. He was going to serve. In 1977, he entered the Order of St. Augustine, one of the oldest religious orders in Catholic tradition. There he began a path of deep formation, intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally. In 1981, he professed his solemn vows. In 1982, he was ordained a priest, not in his homeland, but in Rome, the heart of the church. That moment, kneeling beneath centuries-old ceilings, hands anointed the weight of priesthood, resting upon him, marked the start of a lifelong mission. But Robert Prevost didn't stop at the altar. He pursued advanced education with a devotion that mirrored his faith. He earned a licentiate in theology and a doctorate in canon law at the prestigious Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, known as the Angelicum. Yet he never let knowledge separate him from people. For Robert, education was not for prestige. It was to understand people better, to guide them with wisdom, not ego. Then, in 1985, everything changed. The order sent him far from Rome and Chicago to the hot, dry, rugged terrain of northern Peru, in the diocese of Chulucanas. There were no grand cathedrals, no press, no fame, just villages, hunger, faith, and hope. Father Bob, as he came to be called, walked dirt roads to visit isolated communities. He learned Spanish fluently, lived as the people did, and immersed himself in their joys and sufferings. He didn't arrive to teach them how to believe. He came to believe with them. He built schools. He trained young seminarians. He celebrated baptisms in dusty chapels and buried the dead in humble cemeteries. And he listened. For nearly 2 decades, he became one of them, not as a foreigner, but as a brother. Then in 1999, his life took another turn. He was elected Prior General of the Augustinian Order, one of the most prominent leadership positions in global Catholicism. From Peru to Rome, once again, he now oversaw the order's presence across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. But power never changed him. As Prior General from 1999 to 2013, he emphasized humility, education, and global outreach. He supported missions in poor communities, encouraged interfaith dialogue, and strengthened spiritual formation in places where vocations were dwindling. He served for 14 years, the maximum allowed before returning to Peru, not as a visitor, but now as Bishop of Chiclayo appointed by Pope Francis in 2015. It was a homecoming. As bishop, he reformed seminaries, inspired local clergy, and became a trusted figure among indigenous groups, often traveling hours to reach communities where no bishop had ever gone. He preached not from a throne, but often from a wooden bench beneath a tree. In 2020, Pope Francis once again called upon him. He returned to Rome as a member of the Roman Curia and was soon appointed prefect of the dicastery for bishops, the powerful office responsible for selecting and overseeing bishops across the world. It was a sign of deep trust. For Pope Francis, choosing Robert Prevost meant choosing someone who valued pastoral care over politics, service over status. In 2023, he was made cardinal. And 2 years later, Pope. But through it all, through titles, roles, borders, and languages, Robert remained the same man. Humble, thoughtful, devoted. Not a man trying to reach the top, but one who by always walking downward to serve was quietly lifted upward by the Church, by Providence, by God today. As Pope Leo XIV walks the marble halls of the Vatican, he carries not the weight of ambition, but the burden of hope. He leads not with thunderous declarations, but with quiet clarity, an echo of the same simplicity that once guided him through the fields of Peru, the streets of Chicago, and the silent libraries of Rome. His papacy has only just begun, but already it speaks volumes. He has emphasized 3 pillars: pastoral, closeness, structural reform, and a church that listens before it teaches. He speaks often about the wounded world, a planet groaning under war, inequality, loneliness, and ecological crisis. But unlike many who offer condemnation, Pope Leo XIV offers conversation. In his first addresses as Pope, he called for unity within diversity, urging Catholics to stop fearing difference and start seeking deeper communion. Justice for the poor, reminding governments and corporations that economic progress means nothing if it crushes the human soul. Care for creation, building on the legacy of Pope Francis and calling environmental stewardship not an option, but a moral obligation. And most of all, the return to mercy, that no soul is too broken, no sin too deep, no heart too far for God to reach. Under Pope Leo XIV, the Church isn't turning backward. It's walking forward slowly, carefully, but purposefully toward the margins, toward the unheard, and toward the forgotten. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the world doesn't need a pope of power or charisma or political skill. Maybe it needs a pope of presence. Someone who will kneel beside the dying, who will visit the prisons and touch the hands of the sick. Someone who sees Christ not only in the sanctuary, but in the slums. That's who Pope Leo XIV has always been. And perhaps that is why, after all the centuries, all the councils, and all the cardinals, the Church turned to him. Because in him we see not a ruler in robes, but a pastor with sandals, dust on his feet, compassion in his eyes, and the gospel in his hands. His legacy is not carved in stone. It is being written now in the hearts of those who listen, in the lives of those he lifts, in the questions he dares to ask, and in the courage he calls forth from a weary, wounded church. So remember the name Pope Leo XIV. Not just the first American pope, but perhaps the first of a new kind of shepherd. A shepherd for a church that is learning to walk again, not with pride, but with love.